Apache sisters once fed by Cowboy. 15 years later, they returned to be his brides forever. The sun was already climbing high over the dry, dusty land when the two Apache sisters stumbled through the desert. Their clothes were torn, their feet blistered, and their stomachs ached from days without proper food. The younger sister, Lila, leaned on her older sister, Marin, struggling to keep up with each step. The desert was cruel in this season. Heat shimmered off the sand like waves, and every rock seemed sharper than the last. They had left their village long ago, after a raid had scattered their people and taken away everything they knew. Now they were alone, uncertain, and scared. Marin, though older and stronger, felt the fear settle in her chest like a stone. She had always been the protector, always the one to make decisions. But now even she doubted whether they could survive. Her mind replayed the attack on their village over and over. The sounds of shouting, the smoke, the chaos. She remembered her parents being taken away, and the helplessness she had felt holding Lila close. Now every step through the desert was a test of will, and every sound of the wind or distant crow made her heart race. As they walked, their eyes scanned the horizon for anything that could mean safety. There were no trees, no water, no signs of other people. Only the endless stretch of sand, dotted with rocks and cactus, and the glaring sun above. Their lips were cracked, and their throats burned. Lila tried to smile, trying to be brave for her sister, but the effort faltered. Her small hand clutched Marin's sleeve, and she whispered, "Marin, I'm so hungry." "I can't," she trailed off, tears welling up in her eyes. Marin knelt down and brushed the dirt from Lila's face. "I know, little one," she said softly. "I know. We will find something soon. We have to.
We have to keep going."
But even as she said it, she wondered if she was lying to herself. She had been surviving on roots and small berries for days, and she knew the desert was running out of these small gifts. Hunger gnawed at them both, and fatigue pulled at their muscles like invisible chains. It was then that they saw something unusual on the horizon, a thin wisp of smoke curling toward the sky. Marin's eyes narrowed. Maybe there's someone there," she whispered, hope fluttering in her chest. Lila's face brightened. "Someone? Do you think they will help us?" Marin did not answer immediately. She wanted to believe, but she had learned over the years that hope could sometimes hurt more than hunger. Still, she could not stop herself. "Maybe," she said finally. "We should try." With what little strength remained, they trudged toward the smoke. Hours passed slowly. Every rock, every bush felt like a mountain. Lila stumbled more than once, but Marin always caught her, whispering encouragement. Botanixes finally, the sisters reached a small clearing, and in the distance they saw a small cabin with smoke rising steadily from its chimney. A horse was tied outside, and near the cabin a man was tending a small fire. He was not very tall, but his presence seemed larger somehow. He wore a wide-brimmed hat, a dusty coat, and his boots were covered in dust from the trail. He looked up when he heard them approaching, and his eyes softened. "Well, now," he muttered under his breath, more to himself than to them. Did not look like a threatening man. There was calm in his gaze, and yet there was a strength in the way he stood. The sisters hesitated, unsure whether to call out, frowned. Marin stepped forward first, raising a hand. "Please, we are hungry," she said, her voice quivering. We haven't eaten for many days. Please, can you help us? The man studied them silently for a moment. He noticed their torn clothing, the dirt on their faces, and the weakness in their movements. Something in him stirred. A sense of responsibility, perhaps, or simply compassion. He nodded slowly. "Come here," he said finally, his voice calm and steady. "You look like you could use something to eat." Relief washed over the sisters so suddenly that Lila almost cried aloud. They followed him cautiously, not sure what to expect, but the kindness in his tone made them feel safe for the first time in weeks. Inside the cabin, the air smelled of smoke and cooking. The man, whose name was Samuel, had already set some water to boil over a small fire. He rummaged through his supplies and pulled out a few hard biscuits and some dried meat. "It's not much," he said, offering it to them, "but it will keep you alive for now." Marin and Lila took the food with trembling hands, devouring it slowly. The warmth of the cabin and the taste of food brought tears to their eyes. It was more than nourishment. It was hope returning, like the first drop of rain after a long drought. After they ate, Samuel sat across from them and asked softly, "Where are you from? How did you get out here all alone?" Marin told him their story, of the raid, the loss, and their struggle to survive in the desert. Lila added bits about their journey, the thirst, the hunger, and the fear. Samuel listened quietly, nodding occasionally. He did not interrupt. He did not judge. He simply listened, which made the sisters feel heard for the first time in many days. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Samuel offered them blankets and a place to sleep. "You can rest here tonight," he said. "Tomorrow, we will figure out what comes next." Marin looked at Lila, and they both nodded. The thought of resting, of closing their eyes without fear, was almost overwhelming. For the first time in weeks, they felt safe. That night, as they lay under the blankets, Marin whispered to Lila, "Samuel, he is kind. He saved us." Lila nodded, her eyes wide with wonder. "I never thought someone would help us," she whispered. "I thought everyone would just ignore us, or worse." Marin took her hand. "Sometimes people surprise us," she said. "Sometimes there are those who will be good, even when the world is cruel." Over the next few days, Samuel helped the sisters regain their strength. He showed them how to find water, how to gather wild fruits and roots, and even how to light a fire without much effort. He treated them as equals, teaching them skills that would help them survive in the harsh land, while also making them feel cared for. Marin and Lila listened intently, soaking up every lesson. They learned quickly, but more importantly, they learned that trust and kindness could exist even in a world that had been so cruel to them. By the end of the first week, the sisters were stronger, able to walk without faltering and eat without trembling from weakness. Samuel continued to help them, but he also gave them space, never pushing or controlling. He became a figure of stability in their lives, someone who showed that not all men were cruel, not all people sought to harm them. The sisters felt a bond growing, a bond of gratitude, respect, and quiet admiration. One evening, as the sky turned shades of orange and purple, Lila asked, "Samuel, why did you help us? You barely know us." Samuel looked at her thoughtfully. "Because I could," he said simply. "Because sometimes it is enough to do what is right, and because I know what it is to be alone, without anyone to care." His words lingered in the air, and the sisters felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire burning beside them. For the first time in their young lives, they slept without fear. They had been alone in the desert, hunted by hunger and circumstance, but now they had found a protector, a guide, and a friend. The bond between them was quiet but growing, formed from shared survival, kindness, and trust. Marin and Lila had entered Samuel's life as desperate strangers. But over time, their presence became a source of connection, of life renewed, of hope restored. In those first days, no one could have predicted what the future held. All that mattered was survival, learning, and feeling safe again. The sisters would always remember the harsh desert and the terror it brought, but they would also remember the man who fed them when there was nothing left to give, who protected them when the world had turned its back, and who showed them that humanity could still be kind. And in that small cabin, under the open sky, a story had begun. A story that would take years to fully unfold, but whose roots were already deep in the hearts of all three. Samuel and the two Apache sisters had met in a moment of need, and in that moment they had found each other in a way that nothing could ever erase. After several months living with Samuel, the sisters had grown stronger and more confident in the ways of the land. They could start a fire, gather water, and even track small animals. Maren had become skilled at finding edible plants and roots, while Lila had learned quickly how to move quietly, to watch for signs of danger, and to care for the small animals Samuel kept near his cabin. Life was still hard. There was work every day, and the desert never let one rest completely. But they were no longer hungry, no longer weak, and no longer afraid of immediate survival. Despite their new strength, a quiet sadness lingered in both sisters. Their village had been lost, their parents taken, and they knew they could never return to the lives they had once known. The desert had changed them, but so had the world outside. Samuel noticed it sometimes in the way Maren's eyes would wander to the horizon, or how Lila would pause, remembering a face or place she could no longer reach. But he never pressed them, understanding that some wounds could not be hurried. As time passed, the sisters became more than guests in Samuel's cabin. They became part of the rhythm of his life. They worked together to repair fences, gather firewood, and care for the small garden Samuel had managed to grow despite the harsh desert soil. At first, Samuel had kept a distance, letting them adapt to the routines of survival without making them feel dependent on him. But gradually, a trust developed that went beyond mere survival. The sisters began to share small moments with Samuel, laughing when a chicken ran off with food, or helping him fix a broken wheel on his cart. These small interactions built a quiet, steady bond, one that did not need words to define itself. One afternoon, Maren sat on a flat rock near the edge of the desert, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the wind whispered softly through the dry grass. Lila joined her, holding a small bundle of herbs they had collected. "Do you ever think about home?" Lila asked, her voice soft. Maren looked at her sister and sighed. "I do," she said, "but I don't know if we could ever go back. Even if we wanted to, there is nothing left for us there." Breath. Lila nodded, understanding. "Sometimes I dream about it," she admitted. "I see our village, our parents, even our friends. But when I wake up," breath, "it is just the desert. Just Samuel's cabin. And I feel safe, I suppose. But I still miss them." Maren put her arm around Lila. "But maybe this is a new kind of family. Samuel, he has given us a life again, one we can survive in." Samuel often watched them from a distance, quietly observing their conversations, but his heart swelled with a strange mixture of pride and tenderness. He had saved them when they were weak and alone, and now he watched them grow into capable, brave young women. Dust. He had never expected such a connection to form, yet he realized that he had come to care for them deeply, not just as survivors he had helped, but as people he respected and admired. Yet even with their progress and the safety Samuel provided, the sisters knew their future was uncertain. They were grateful for the present, but they could not forget the past. The raids, the loss of family, and the fragility of life in the desert lingered in their minds like shadows. Sometimes they would wake in the middle of the night, startled by a sound outside, remembering the chaos of the past. Samuel would quietly reassure them, offering his presence and his calm voice, and slowly their fears would ease. Over time, they began to sleep more peacefully, knowing they were protected. One day, Samuel decided it was time for the sisters to learn more than just survival skills. "There is more to living than just finding food and water," he said, looking at them seriously. "But you must also know how to plan, to protect yourselves and to think ahead. The world is not easy, but if you know it well, you can make it your friend instead of your enemy." The sisters nodded eagerly, ready to absorb whatever he would teach. Over the next few weeks, Samuel showed them how to read the signs of the desert, how to predict storms, how to find hidden water sources, and how to use shadows and wind to navigate safely. These lessons were more than practical. They were empowering. As the seasons changed, a deep friendship grew between Samuel and the sisters. They would sit around the fire at night, telling stories of the past, laughing at small mistakes, and sharing quiet silences that felt comfortable rather than awkward. Samuel began to share parts of his life too, telling them about his childhood, about the challenges he had faced alone in the desert, and about the dreams he once had. The sisters listened with fascination, realizing that this man, who had appeared to them as a savior, was also human, flawed, lonely, and resilient, just like them. Despite this growing bond, the day eventually came when Marin realized they could not stay in Samuel's cabin forever. Their people, scattered across the desert, might still be looking for them, or they might have perished. There was a pull toward the world they had lost, even though returning meant facing uncertainty and danger. One evening, as the sky turned dark and stars glittered overhead, "We can stay here," she said softly. "But I feel we should see if we can find our people. Narration. At least we should try." Lila nodded, though a pang of fear went through her. "Right. I'm scared," she admitted, "but I don't want to regret never trying." When they brought this to Samuel, he listened without anger or disappointment. "But I understand," he said finally. "You have roots elsewhere. You must follow them, if only to honor your past. But know this, you will always have a place here. If you return, the door is open. You are welcome." The sisters were grateful, their hearts heavy with both excitement and sorrow. They had found a life with Samuel, but they also had a duty to the past, to their people, and to themselves. Over the next weeks, the sisters prepared for their departure. Samuel helped them gather supplies and taught them even more about traveling safely. He gave them advice on how to find water, how to avoid danger, and how to use the land to their advantage. "You are stronger than you think," he reminded them. "The desert may be harsh, but you have learned its ways. You will survive." The sisters felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for his guidance, but for the trust and respect he had shown them. On the day of their departure, the air was filled with quiet tension. Samuel packed a small bag with dried meat, herbs, and water, and handed it to Marin. "Take care of each other," he said. "Remember what you have learned here. And no matter where life takes you, narration, don't forget the kindness you have been given." Marin and Lila nodded, tears brimming in their eyes. They hugged Samuel tightly, feeling the strength of their connection. It was not just gratitude. They felt love, trust, and a bond that distance could not break. As the sisters walked away, Samuel watched from the cabin doorway. He felt a strange mixture of pride and sorrow. They had grown stronger, braver, and wiser under his guidance, and now they were leaving to face the world on their own. Jesus Christ knew he might never see them again, but he also knew that their journey was only beginning, and that the seeds of trust, kindness, and survival he had planted in them would continue to grow. Marin and Lila traveled for many days, guided by their memories and the lessons Samuel had taught them. The desert was still harsh, still full of challenges, but they faced it with confidence and skill. At night they would look back at the distant horizon, imagining the cabin where Samuel waited, and they would whisper words of gratitude. "We will return," Marin said once to Lila. "If not now, then someday. He saved us, and we will honor that always." Lila nodded, feeling the truth of her sister's words in her heart. The journey back to their people was filled with both hardship and hope. They encountered rocky paths, sparse water sources, and the loneliness of the open desert. But the lessons Samuel had taught them made every obstacle manageable. They shared stories to pass the time, sang quiet songs to lift their spirits, and comforted each other when exhaustion set in. Through it all, the memory of Samuel's kindness gave them strength. They were not alone even when far from the cabin. By the time they reached the outskirts of their old territory, the sisters had changed profoundly. They were no longer frightened children, but strong, capable young women, ready to face whatever awaited them. The experience with Samuel had shaped them, giving them skills, courage, and a sense of hope. And though their people were scattered in their village in ruins, they carried with them a new kind of family, one that could survive even the harshest desert trials. Peace. 15 years had passed since Marin and Lila had left Samuel's cabin. In that time, their lives had been filled with struggle, learning, and growth. The desert had tested them in ways they could never have imagined. They had survived long journeys, harsh weather, and the uncertainty of scattered tribes. Yet despite everything, the memory of Samuel, the man who had saved them when they were at their weakest, never left their hearts. They often spoke of him in quiet moments, imagining the cabin, the fire, and the soft voice that had guided them when the world seemed cruel. Now, as young women, they felt a pull they could not ignore. It was time to return, not just to express gratitude, but to see the man who had changed their lives and perhaps, in some quiet way, to reunite with him. Their journey back would be long, and it would not be easy. They knew the desert could be unforgiving, even to those who had survived it before. But the hope of reunion, of reconnecting with someone who had once been so vital to their survival, gave them strength. The sisters left their small village at dawn, their belongings packed lightly with only what was essential: a few changes of clothing, some dried food, a small water skin, and the skills Samuel had taught them. Grasping at the horizon, as they walked, Lila kept glancing at the horizon, imagining the smoke of Samuel's cabin rising in the distance. Marin walked beside her, steady and determined, her eyes scanning the desert for signs of danger or life. "Breaths, do you think he will remember us?" Lila asked quietly, her voice filled with both hope and fear. Marin squeezed her hand. "Of course he will," she said. "He saved us. How could anyone forget that?" The journey was long and grueling. They traveled through rocky canyons, crossed dry riverbeds, and climbed steep ridges. The sun beat down mercilessly during the day, and at night the temperature dropped sharply. The sisters relied on everything Samuel had taught them: how to find hidden water, how to track animals, and how to shelter themselves safely during storms. There were times when exhaustion threatened to overcome them, but they encouraged each other, reminding one another that Samuel's cabin awaited at the end of the journey.
On the 5th day, they reached a small plateau and saw a thin wisp of smoke curling into the sky.
Breath. Lila froze. "Marin, look," she whispered. Marin's heart skipped a beat. The smoke looked familiar, and hope surged through her chest. "That has to be him," she said, her voice trembling. They quickened their pace, moving as fast as their tired legs would allow, for death. With every step, memories of the past flooded back, the warmth of the fire, the meals they had eaten, the lessons Samuel had taught them. They had grown up since then, but the bond they had formed with him had remained. When they finally reached the cabin, they hesitated at the edge of the clearing. Samuel was outside, tending to a small garden. He was older now. His hair had turned gray at the temples, and his face was lined with the marks of years spent under the harsh sun. Yet he carried the same calm strength that had comforted them so long ago. He looked up and squinted at the approaching figures. For a moment he did not recognize them. Then his eyes widened, and a faint smile appeared on his face. Marin? Lila, he said, his voice breaking slightly. The sisters nodded, tears welling up in their eyes. Samuel, Marin whispered. They ran toward him and he opened his arms. The three of them embraced, and for a long moment words were not necessary. The past 15 years seemed to collapse into that single moment of reunion. They were safe. They were together again. After a while, they stepped back, still holding hands. "I can't believe it's really you," Samuel said, his voice filled with wonder. "You've grown so much?" Lila laughed softly, a sound full of relief and joy. "We had to survive," she said. "And we did, thanks to you." Marin nodded. "We never forgot what you did for us, Samuel." We had to come back. By die. Inside the cabin, the sisters settled in once more. Samuel had prepared a meal, simple but hearty, and they ate together, sharing stories of the years apart. They told him about the small village they had joined, the hardships they had faced, and the lessons they had learned. Samuel listened quietly, proud and amazed at their resilience. "You have both become incredible young women," he said softly.
I always knew you had strength, but seeing it now...
Breath. "I am truly impressed." As the sun set that evening, the three of them sat outside watching the sky turn shades of pink and purple. The desert was quiet except for the soft rustle of wind through the grass. For the first time in many years, they felt completely at peace. The bond they had formed long ago had not been broken by time or distance. It had grown stronger, rooted in survival, trust, and gratitude. The following days were filled with familiar routines. The sisters helped Samuel tend to the cabin, repair fences, and care for the small garden. They moved easily through tasks they had once learned as young girls, now performing them with skill and confidence. Samuel taught them even more, sharing new techniques and strategies he had developed over the years. Lila learned to ride a horse more confidently, while Marin worked on improving the irrigation system for the garden. Their presence brought life and energy to the cabin, and Samuel felt a sense of completeness he had not experienced in years. But reunion was not without its challenges. Samuel had lived alone for so long that having two people in his daily life was an adjustment. There were small disagreements, moments of tension, and times when the sisters' independence clashed with his routines. Yet they navigated these moments with care, learning to communicate openly and respectfully. Over time, they developed a harmony, a balance that made the cabin feel like home once again. One morning, while gathering herbs near the edge of the desert, Marin turned to Samuel and said, "We have come back not just to say thank you, but because we feel this is where we belong. You saved us, and you gave us a life. Inspiration. We want to stay, if you will have us." Samuel was quiet for a moment, considering her words. He looked at the sisters, now fully grown, capable, and wise, and felt a deep warmth in his heart. "You've always been welcome here," he said finally. "But I never expected this. You have chosen to return, and that is something I will honor. We will figure out what the future looks like together." Over the following weeks, the sisters and Samuel spent long hours talking, planning, and simply enjoying each other's company. They shared stories, dreams, and hopes for the future. The cabin, once quiet and solitary, was now filled with laughter, conversation, and a sense of belonging. Each day, the bond between them grew stronger, built on a foundation of shared history, respect, and trust. One evening, as the three sat outside under a sky full of stars, Lila whispered, "I never thought we would see you again, Samuel. I never thought." Her voice faltered. Marin placed a hand on hers. "We made it," she said. "We found our way back, and we are here now. We are together." Samuel reached out and held both of their hands. "I never forgot you either," he said softly. "And now we have a chance to build something lasting. Not just survival, but life, and family, and trust. All of it together." The sisters felt a sense of peace and joy they had never known before. They had returned not just to repay a debt of gratitude, but to reunite with someone who had shaped their lives in profound ways. Samuel had given them safety and knowledge when they were young and vulnerable. Now, as adults, they brought back love, respect, and devotion. The reunion was more than a meeting of past and present. It was the start of a new chapter, one filled with hope, connection, and the promise of shared days ahead. Though the world beyond the desert was still unpredictable, they had found stability here, in each other's presence. Samuel, Marin, and Lila had reunited after 15 years, but their bond felt as if no time had passed at all. The cabin, the fire, and the wide-open desert became a place where past struggles were honored, present joys were celebrated, and future dreams could be pursued. They were no longer two girls and a solitary man. They were a unit, bound by survival, gratitude, and the deep understanding that life was better when shared. As the stars twinkled overhead and the desert air grew cool, Samuel, Marin, and Lila sat in quiet contentment. Words were not needed. Their hearts understood each other perfectly. In the vast, harsh world around them, they had found a place of safety, love, and belonging. The past had been difficult, but it had brought them here, to this reunion, where the ties forged in survival and kindness had blossomed into something enduring, and for the first time in many years, all three of them felt whole again. The days that followed the reunion were filled with a mixture of comfort and new challenges. Samuel, Marin, and Lila had found their way back to each other, but now they had to navigate what it meant to live together again. For 15 years, Samuel had been alone, with a life defined by solitude and routine. The cabin, once quiet and predictable, was now full of voices, laughter, and movement. At first, the sudden changes were overwhelming. Even the simplest tasks, cooking meals, tending the animals, repairing fences, became exercises in coordination and compromise. Marin noticed the tension first. She had returned to Samuel's cabin with excitement and hope, but she also realized that adjusting to daily life with someone after so many years was not easy. Lila, though younger, also felt the strain. She had grown up learning independence and self-reliance, and suddenly, their decisions and actions had to be shared, discussed, and sometimes negotiated. Samuel sensed their unease and did his best to remain patient. He knew the sisters were grateful for everything he had done, but he also understood that building a life together would require time, trust, and understanding. One morning, while checking the small garden near the edge of the cabin, Samuel spoke gently. "Life together is not just about survival anymore," he said. "We need to find a way to live that works for all of us. I am willing to learn, to change, if you are. But we must be honest with each other. There is no single way to do this. Marin looked at him thoughtfully. "We want that too," she said. "We've survived on our own for so long, but now we want to build something lasting, something more than just survival. Perhaps we want to be part of this life, Samuel, but we also want to be seen, heard, and respected as individuals." Over the next few weeks, they began to establish routines and responsibilities. Marin took the lead with gathering and preparing food, drawing on the skills Samuel had taught her years ago. Lila focused on caring for the animals and maintaining the cabin, bringing her own creative solutions and efficiency for it. Samuel worked alongside them, teaching new techniques and learning from their fresh perspectives. Slowly, the cabin became a place of cooperation, where each person's strengths were recognized and valued.
Yet, life was not without its challenges. Some days, small disagreements arose.
Marin and Lila occasionally clashed over priorities, and Samuel had to navigate his own habits and preferences that had been formed over a lifetime of solitude. There were moments of frustration. Broken tools, spilled water, disagreements over how to arrange the garden. But these conflicts were handled with care, never harshly, and always with the goal of understanding, rather than anger. Each challenge became an opportunity to grow closer, to communicate more clearly, and to strengthen their bond. One afternoon, Samuel took the sisters to a nearby ridge overlooking the desert. The wind was cool, and the view stretched endlessly into the horizon. "I want you to see something," he said softly. "This land has been my home for many years. It is harsh, yes, but it is also beautiful. It gives us lessons, if we are willing to listen. Living here together will not always be easy, but it can be meaningful." Marin and Lila looked out at the wide expanse of desert, feeling the truth of his words. They realized that their life together would require patience, resilience, and respect for both the land and each other. As days turned into weeks, deeper conversations emerged. Samuel spoke of his fears, of losing the life they had just rebuilt, of not being able to provide for them as the years passed, and of the responsibility he felt in caring for two people who had once been so vulnerable. Marin shared her own worries about fitting into his world and maintaining her independence. Lila admitted her fear of being dependent, even as she craved the comfort of safety and belonging. These conversations, though difficult, brought them closer. They learned to listen, to support, and to compromise. One evening, a small challenge tested their growing connection. A sudden storm swept across the desert, bringing heavy rain, strong winds, and loud thunder. The sisters were frightened. The storm reminded them of the harsh days they had survived alone. Samuel guided them calmly, showing them how to secure the cabin, protect the animals, and stay safe. Together they worked through the night, supporting each other with quiet words of reassurance. By morning the storm had passed, leaving the desert fresh and bright, and a renewed sense of unity in its wake. They realized that facing challenges together strengthened their bond far more than any comfort could.
As time passed, Samuel, Marin, and Lila began to dream about the future together.
They spoke about building a stronger home, improving the garden, and possibly even welcoming others who needed help. They discussed ways to ensure that their life was not only safe and sustainable, but also meaningful. The sisters brought new ideas, inspired by the wisdom they had gained during their years apart. Samuel, in turn, offered guidance, experience, and a steady hand to help implement their plans. Their lives began to feel richer, more complete, and full of purpose. One evening, as they sat by the fire under a sky full of stars, Marin spoke quietly. "Samuel, we have returned, not just to be with you for a moment, but to build a life. We are willing to face challenges together, to support each other, and to make this our home. But we want to do it with honesty, respect, and love. We hope you feel the same." Samuel looked at them, feeling the depth of their words. "I do," he said softly. "I have always cared for you, even when we were apart. And now, I want to build a life with both of you. One where we face challenges, celebrate successes, and live fully together." The weeks that followed were marked by small, everyday joys. They cooked meals together, laughed at mistakes, and celebrated minor victories, like a successful harvest from the garden or the arrival of fresh water in the creek. They shared stories, sang songs, and supported each other through moments of doubt or fear. The cabin, once a place of quiet solitude, became a home filled with warmth, cooperation, and understanding. Through these experiences, Samuel began to see the sisters not only as the young girls he had once protected, but as strong, capable, and wise women. Marin and Lila in turn saw Samuel not only as a savior but as a partner, someone who could be trusted, respected, and loved. The initial tension of adjusting to life together gradually gave way to harmony, built on mutual respect, shared history, and the deep understanding that they were stronger together than apart. One afternoon, while working in the garden, Lila paused and looked at Samuel. "We've been through so much," she said. "We survived the desert, we faced our fears, and now we are here. I think we can be happy. Truly happy." Samuel nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest. "Yes," he said. "Happiness is not easy, but with trust, respect, and love, it is possible. And we will find it together." Marin smiled, feeling a sense of peace she had not known in years. They had faced the past, endured separation, and now had the chance to build a life together, a life that could be filled with joy, purpose, and connection. The months continued, each day bringing new lessons and experiences. They celebrated the changing seasons, tended to the animals, repaired the cabin, and shared quiet evenings by the fire. The sisters' skills and wisdom complemented Samuel's experience, creating a life that was both sustainable and fulfilling. And through it all, the bond between them deepened, no longer simply born of gratitude and survival, but of genuine connection, love, and mutual respect. By the end of the year, the trio had established a life that balanced independence with partnership, work with joy, and routine with adventure. They had faced challenges together, communicated openly, and built a foundation strong enough to endure the harshness of the desert and the uncertainty of life beyond it. Their relationship was no longer defined solely by the past. It had grown into something lasting, meaningful, and full of promise. As they sat together one evening, watching the sun set over the desert, Samuel, Marin, and Lila realized that they had come through a difficult journey. Separated by time and distance, tested by nature and life, but had emerged stronger, united, and ready for the future. The challenges they had faced had not broken them. Instead, they had strengthened their bond and clarified what mattered most. In each other, they had found family, friendship, and a partnership built on trust, care, and unwavering support. The years that followed were gentle and full of quiet joys. Samuel, Marin, and Lila had settled into a life that was steady, meaningful, and rooted in the desert they had come to know so well. Their days began with the sun tending to the garden, caring for animals, and maintaining the cabin, though life still demanded effort. The hardships of survival were softened by the strength of their bond. They had built more than a home. They had built a life together, one filled with understanding, respect, and love. In the mornings, the sisters would rise with the first light. Marin often took charge of preparing breakfast, while Lila fed the chickens and milked the goats. Samuel would sit nearby, sometimes helping, sometimes watching with quiet satisfaction. He had watched these girls grow into women capable of so much, and now, as partners in life, their presence filled his heart with a deep and steady joy. Each day was busy, yet calm, the kind of days that allowed for both work and connection, teaching them all patience, gratitude, and the pleasure of simple living. Despite the routines of daily life, the cabin was never dull. Laughter echoed through the rooms, as small mistakes were made and corrected, as new ideas were tried in the garden, or as animals created mischief. Marin and Lila's energy and creativity breathed life into Samuel's solitary home, and he in turn offered guidance, wisdom, and a grounding presence. They worked as a team, their efforts balanced and complementary. Where Samuel had once been alone, they now shared every success and challenge, every moment of quiet reflection and excitement. The sisters had grown wise through their experiences, yet they still found comfort in Samuel's presence. Breaths. He had once saved them from hunger, fear, and loneliness, but now he was a source of emotional stability, a partner whose care and understanding strengthened them. They knew they had chosen well, and he knew the same. Their connection was deeper than gratitude. It was built on mutual respect, trust, and a shared history that nothing could erase. Each day reinforced the truth that they were stronger together than they could ever be apart. One day, as the sun rose over the desert, Samuel and the sisters walked together to the top of a nearby ridge. From there, they could see the wide expanse of the land that had once seemed so harsh and unforgiving. "Look how far we've come," Samuel said softly. "This land has tested us, but it has also given us life, strength, and a home." Marin smiled, her eyes sparkling with pride. "We've learned so much," she said, "and we've survived not just alone, but together. That is what makes this place special." Lila nodded, adding, "We are part of this land now, and it is part of us. We can finally feel at home." Life in the cabin continued, but the sisters and Samuel also found ways to give back to the community around them. They would help travelers who passed through the desert, share supplies with those in need, and teach skills to others who wanted to survive in the harsh land. Their home became known as a place of kindness, wisdom, and hospitality. The sisters took pride in their role, remembering the days when they had been the ones in need. They understood the power of generosity and guidance, and they passed it on, strengthening the bonds of their community.
Over time, the sisters' connection with Samuel deepened into a quiet, unspoken understanding of love.
It was not the sudden, overwhelming kind often spoken of in stories. It was steadier, built on years of shared struggle, trust, and mutual care. Samuel, too, had come to see them not as children he once helped, but as equals, partners whose presence enriched his life in ways he had never imagined. Their lives were intertwined in the most natural way, each person supporting and uplifting the others. Evenings were a favorite time. As the sun set and the sky turned gold and purple, they would sit together outside the cabin. Samuel would tend a small fire, while Marin and Lila prepared tea or bread. They shared stories of the past, dreams for the future, and quiet moments of reflection. Sometimes they simply watched the desert stretch into the horizon, feeling the vastness of the world around them and the comfort of having each other. In these moments, no words were needed. Their bond was evident in every glance, every touch, every gesture of care. The seasons changed, and with them came new opportunities and challenges. Spring brought the excitement of planting new crops, while summer demanded careful tending of the garden to ensure survival in the heat. Autumn offered harvest and reflection, while winter brought quiet nights around the fire, where stories and memories were shared. Through it all, they faced difficulties together, learning patience, cooperation, and the importance of shared responsibility. Every challenge was met as a team, every success celebrated as a family. As the years passed, their home grew stronger. Samuel repaired and expanded the cabin, adding storage and a small workshop. The sisters introduced new gardening techniques and experimented with ways to improve their water supply. Their lives were busy, but the work was rewarding, and each day was a testament to what they could accomplish together. They had taken a place once defined by solitude and struggle and transformed it into a home filled with life, laughter, and purpose. Breath. Despite the simplicity of their life, there were moments of reflection about the past. Marin often thought about their village, the people they had lost, and the journey that had brought them back to Samuel. Lila reflected on the lessons learned during their years apart, the strength they had gained, and the love that now surrounded them. Samuel, too, thought about the years of solitude he had spent, and how meeting and helping the sisters had changed the direction of his life completely. Each of them carried memories of struggle and survival, but those memories were softened and enriched by the bond they now shared. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Samuel spoke quietly to the sisters. "We have built something rare here," he said. "A life filled with trust, care, and love. I never expected this when I first met you, but now I can't imagine my life any other way." But Marin and Lila exchanged a glance, feeling the truth of his words. "We feel the same," Marin said softly. "You saved us, taught us, and believed in us, and now we have returned not just out of gratitude, but because we belong here, with you." Leela nodded in agreement. Breath. "Our lives are intertwined now," she added, "and we will face the future together, whatever it brings." Time passed gently, and the trio continued to build a life of stability, comfort, and love. They celebrated milestones quietly. The first harvest from the garden, a new animal born, the repair of a long-broken fence. But each success was meaningful, a symbol of what they had accomplished together. They learned to find joy in the simple things. The warmth of the fire, the taste of fresh food, the beauty of the desert at sunrise. These were the moments that filled their lives with contentment and peace. But through it all, their bond remained unshakable. The hardships of the past, the separation, and the long journey back had all strengthened their connection. They had learned the value of trust, patience, and mutual respect. Each day they supported each other, listened to each other, and celebrated each other's strengths. They had become more than companions. They had become family in the truest sense, bound not by obligation but by love, care, and shared history. One afternoon, as Samuel worked on repairing the roof of the cabin, Marin and Lila watched from below. Lila turned to her sister, smiling. "I never imagined life could be like this," she said. "Perhaps, after everything we went through, we are finally happy." Marin nodded, feeling the same sense of fulfillment. "It is not just happiness," she said. "It is peace. We are safe, loved, and strong. And we have each other. That is everything." The sun set slowly over the desert, casting a golden glow over the cabin, the garden, and the surrounding landscape. Samuel, Marin, and Lila stood together at the edge of the property, holding hands, and looking out at the vast, beautiful land that had once seemed so harsh. They were no longer defined by fear, hunger, or solitude. They had faced the past, endured separation, and built a life that was full of meaning, love, and hope. The desert, which had once tested them, now stood as a witness to their strength and resilience. In those quiet moments, it was clear that the journey they had taken, through hunger, fear, separation, and reunion, had led them to something extraordinary. They had found safety, trust, and companionship. They had learned to rely on each other, to respect one another, and to love without reservation. And in this home, built through hardship and care, they had found a forever place, a place where the past was honored, the present was cherished, and the future could be embraced together. The sisters, once frightened and hungry children, now lived as capable, confident, and joyful women. Samuel, once a solitary man, now experienced the richness of family, partnership, and love. Together, they had turned survival into a life of meaning, kindness, and connection. And as the stars appeared in the night sky, they knew with certainty that their bond, born from gratitude, strengthened by trust, and nurtured by love, would endure forever.